No, I actually came across this last year, 2015, when we went to the Galapagos Islands, which are on the equator, and we were on a boat. We went sort of pop, 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 one night at each different island. And on one day, the guide said, we're staying now at a coral reef which is small and fragile, and the currents tend to trap the water there so it doesn't get good washing through. Please don't wear sunblock. And I'd kind of heard maybe that sunblock might have been dangerous in some way, some sort of sunblock, but I'd never actually come across it that close. And I thought, oh my God, there's something going on. So I read up on it, and to my surprise, it is actually a fairly major factor.
Wow, so what exactly is in the sunscreen that's making it so harmful for coral reefs in particular?
Well, there's many different types of sunscreen and many different types of chemicals in them, and it's a whole enormous field. There's one chemical which goes under the name of oxybenzone, and it's good and bad. What's good about it is that it blocks both UVA, which is close to ultraviolet, and UVB, and not many chemicals do that, so it's used widely in all sorts of products, including cosmetics, and over 3,500 sunscreens. So that's the good thing about it, it's got a wide range. The disadvantage is that it appears to attack the coral, which I didn't really realise. So I read these papers on it. And so here's a direct quote from one of the papers. It damages the very DNA of the coral. And I quote, it causes oxidative damage to the DNA, formation of cyclobutane pyrimidinic dimers, you don't want that, single-strand DNA breaks, you don't want the DNA to be breaking, cross-linking of DNA to proteins, so that instead of standing free, the DNA is linked to proteins and it can't do its job, and so on and so on and so on. And as a result, the coral is less likely to reproduce when there are high levels of the oxybenzone around, and when it does reproduce, it's less likely to be fertile, and the babies are less likely to be strong, and then that leads to a weakening of the coral further down the line. It also has hormonal effects, where it acts on the baby coral to make them less likely to land and sit on a rock, and makes their mouths 5 times bigger, and that causes a real mess up. It also predisposes the coral as an adult to be more prone to bleaching, so global warming is real, and so the temperatures up, so it makes it even worse there. And then finally, it acts as an endocrine or hormone disruptor, and in this particular case, what it does with the coral is the coral sits there as this little blobby creature, and it makes a certain amount of calcium around itself, limestone. In this case, it makes so much that it covers itself up and suffocates itself.
Wow, there are quite some serious implications
there.
there.
But you need fairly high levels, and the levels that they were talking about was some 60 parts per trillion, which is like a little tiny drop of water in 6 Olympic swimming pools. And so you're thinking, well, OK, it's working at fairly dilute levels. What are we finding that humans are dumping into the environment? It turns out that we sort of dump about 10,000 tonnes of this chemical into the oceans every year, and the levels that they measured in the Hawaiian Islands and the American Virgin Islands were up to 20,000 times higher than a toxic level. 20,000 times higher. Not twice as high or 10 times, but 20,000 times higher. That was an extreme one, but nevertheless it shows that we...
Have you got any measurements in Australia? Because obviously we're a high sun-aware nation.
Sure, and so you'd be expecting more of this chemical to be there. He didn't do his work in Australia, and we need to get the scientists out there to measure it and to try to help save the reef.
Because we have such an incredible problem with coral bleaching.
Already.
Not just on the Great Barrier Reef, but in other parts of Australia as well.
Luckily, the reef is huge and the people only go to a small part of it, but we just need to... Look, no matter what we do, we disturb the universe. And you just want to know what we're doing and then try to minimise it. And so there's been several examples where we humans have done potentially bad things to the environment and we've stopped it. So with the case of, say, DDT, the companies made it in good faith and it seemed to have good effects. And only later did we discover that it was making the shells of birds so weak that the babies wouldn't hatch properly. And when they started finding it in the Antarctic, in penguin eggs, then the governments of the world got together and said, OK, no more. And we had had the same thing happening with the CFCs, and that was a really good chemical at the time when it was invented in the 1930s. Only later did we discover that it was punching a hole in the ozone layer. The governments of the world got together. Acid rain was another one. We didn't realise that the sulphur in coal was causing sulphuric acid, killing the fish in some northern lakes. The governments of the world got together. So we just need to recognise this as a problem and find different chemicals, better chemicals.
Are there alternatives to the oxybenzone?
There are, and they have their problems, but we can get around that. So with regard to the CFCs, you know, they were in the refrigerators. Initially, the governments of the world said, look, we can't possibly come up with another chemical. We're stuck with CFCs. And the governments of the world said, you're clever people, do something, and they came up with better chemicals. And so we can do the same thing again. And so straight away you go with, say, the zinc and the titanium, and they have their own problems. No matter what we do, we're going to disturb the universe. We just want to do the least amount of disturbance, and we just need to go down that pathway. And then on the long term, everybody will be better off because the reef will be here, the tourist dollars will be here, the fish will be there, because the coral reefs, even though they occupy a microscopic percentage of the world's oceans, generate a huge percentage of the fish.
Indeed they do. So maybe don't forget the slip and the slap in the slip, slop, slap.
Yeah, and then this is one where the politicians have to act for the common good of the people to pass the laws.
Dr. Carl, thank you very much.
Thank you.